The Guelph Cenotaph by Patrick Liu. Guelph. As the birthplace of Lieutenant Colonel John McCrae, the author of the poem In Flanders Fields, it is no surprise that Guelph spent 17 times more on its cenotaph than any other place in the Wellington County. Although the select individuals commemorated by the Guelph Cenotaph have faded in some regards, the memorial remains a symbol of the sacrifices made by soldiers in the past and present. As early as September 1920, the desire for a war memorial emerged. During the First World War, 219 Guelphites were killed, and 20 of those were not even 20 when they made the ultimate sacrifice. Thus, it is only reasonable that Guelph wanted a war memorial to honor their veterans. The cenotaph was estimated to cost $25,000, and Bylaw 1694 was proposed to cover the cost, but it was defeated in the 1924 election. 771 votes supported the new tax, while 1,217 were against it, perhaps indicating that day-to-day considerations eclipsed more abstract needs, such as building a memorial. Fortunately, the May 18th to 21st fundraising campaign in 1925 for the cenotaph received $15,000 in donations from 1,500 contributors. Although the city was still short 10,000, the campaign's success indicated the cenotaph showed widespread support, although there might have been disagreements over how it should be funded. Thus, many people believed in the necessity of a memorial to remember the fallen. The final design by Alfred Howell can be broken down into two portions. At the top stands a standard Canadian soldier in his First World War uniform, draping a flag over his shoulder. He represents all Canadian soldiers and patriotism. Above him stands an angel pointing to a tablet where the soldier's name has been inscribed. Through the symbol of the soldier and the angel, Howell conveys that fighting for one's country will forever immortalize one's name, hiding how the sacrifices of the past will remain in societal memory. Additionally, it is a call for us to remember the sacrifices made by soldiers of the past to protect our country and livelihood. Below the two granite statues stands a female figure, representing justice, albeit she holds a pair of swords in each hand rather than the usual scales. Both swords are held at equal height, a metaphor for how the soldiers on both sides of the conflict believed in the justness of their cause. Each sword, representing a different side of the conflict, is downturned and at rest, symbolizing that now both sides are at peace. Thus, the bronze lower statue represents the importance of peace and empathy with those who were once our enemies. While this was the intended meaning of the architect, for many Guelphites, the cenotaph was a place for them to remember fallen family and friends. During the First World War, majority of the Canadian soldiers that were killed were buried in Europe, far from their homes in Canada. Thus, cenotaphs, meaning empty graves, were erected as a place for family and friends to remember their lost community member. This memorial, like many others across the country, was a place for relatives to remember their lost kin. Although initially dedicated to the fallen of the First World War, in 1947 the dates 1939 to 1945 were added. This expanded the meaning of the memorial to include service members of the Second World War. In 2015, the City of Guelph dictated that the names of any members of the Canadian Forces from Guelph who have died as a result of their military service will be added to the Guelph Cenotaph in honor of their service. This further changed the meaning of the cenotaph to include all conflicts, including the Korean War and UN peacekeeping missions. With every year, due to the influx of immigrants to Guelph, as well as the widening generational gap, the stories and connections with the individuals that this cenotaph commemorates fades a little more. In 2007, the honor roll was moved beside the cenotaph from the Memorial Gardens hockey arena. The addition of the names provides a small avenue to the individuals who sacrificed themselves for our country, but the insight remains limited. A casual viewer would never know that Sarah Josephine was one of the first women in the Royal Canadian Air Force. After all, not much can be deduced from a single name. I interpret this to cenotaph to be a symbol that honors making sacrifices for others, especially through military service. It can be difficult to remember the stories of each individual, but we can all honor their collective work and the sacrifices made by the servicemen and servicewomen of the past. Today, in the 21st century, cenotaphs play a key role in all remembrance ceremonies, including Remembrance Day and Decoration Day events. Unfortunately, some people misinterpret these memorials as celebrations of war and violence rather than of sacrifice and service. Several years ago, Many Cenotaphs across Canada were desecrated prior to Remembrance Day. From this, a new tradition was born. Every night before Remembrance Day, cadets across Canada will hold an overnight vigil around cenotaphs to protect them. This reminds me of the line from In Flanders Fields that said, "To you the torch we throw." I interpret this as the youth of the new generation coming to take upon the responsibility to remember the courage of the soldiers from the past, as well as their efforts to uphold the values of freedom, peace, and liberty. Overall, the Guelph Cenotaph has changed from remembering only the soldiers of the First World War to soldiers of all conflicts. This reflects how the memorial has changed from being a place for friends and family to remember fallen relatives to being a key symbol of remembrance of the values of sacrifice.